Okay, I can officially wish everybody a good afternoon, because it's 12 sharp. Hi everybody, I hope you've been enjoying the breaks a little bit, enjoying the talks. I've seen some interesting stuff already, or had nice conversations with everybody here at the venue. Here on stage with me are Jan and Simon. And I've known these guys for several years right now. They've been very helpful in contributing to, well, the entire Axon sphere actually, and I've greatly come to enjoy the talks I've had with these people about the things they are doing and how they're, well, trying to make the world give better software. So without further ado, I want to, well, give you guys the stage.
Yeah, hello everyone. Nice to be back. When you start a presentation, it's a rule of thumb, start with a joke or start with a definition. I like to start with a story that brought us here today. So what we did last year, not on this exact stage, but here in Amsterdam on the AxonIQ, we had a really sophisticated academic talk about inter-context communication patterns, and we were on this stage. Anyone saw this? Quick raise of hand. Cool. I admire that you come back, although you already know us. During this presentation, I made a mistake because I like to tell stories, and I mentioned, just to lighten the mood a bit, I mentioned this table soccer software we are building at Holisticon. And after the talk, it happened what must happen. Half of the conversations, discussions, and questions we had were not to this highly sophisticated communication patterns, but about this table soccer application. So we said, okay, we have to come back, and we were accepted. And my initial plan was, we bring it to you. So I wanted to have a table soccer table here, our software installed and playing, but you would just see the back of some people standing on the stage, so we would need a camera filming this from high up. It was much too complicated and expensive. So we brought the next best thing we could imagine, a promotional video from the GetRanked website. And let's just have a look. So this is what we're going to talk about. We are not a table soccer company, but table soccer plays an important role in the social life of Holisticon. And these are some of my colleagues. So what we do is we do not just want to score goals and measure who's winning, but we also want to have statistics, who is the best player, which teams work best together, who's better in the front, who's better in the defense. If 4 people meet at the table, what would be the best matchup to have a fair game? And this is what we are going to present today. And of course, not only the concept of this table soccer stuff, but also the patterns and implementation styles we came up with that are also, at least in our opinion, interesting for real serious, real-life applications you do all day. So yeah, Stephen also said, I'm Jan. This is my friend and colleague, Simon.
Hello.
We've been working very close together for, I don't know, 10 years maybe. And we have somehow interconnected brain waves. So we have one brain with 2 bodies, which help with faster coding. And when we do an introduction of our expertise and what we are doing, this happens typically. So one of us tells what he does, and the other one just nods and says, me too, because it's very close. We are both consultants at, if you continue please, at Holisticon, wonderful country located in northern Germany, in Hanover, Hamburg, and Kiel. We are an Axonic partner and also a proud sponsor of this year's AxonIQ. And yes, of course, obviously, we are hiring. If you like us, like what we're doing, join us at the booth. And yeah, but now let's start with the actual talk. So we are on a mission, and our mission is to build a table soccer application. I told you it's very important for us. If a new colleague is onboarded, and she says, I don't know, she doesn't like table soccer, or she's just not that good, or there's no excuse. You have to play table soccer. This is how we bond, how we talk. And yeah, this is now our third version of trying to build table soccer tracking application. This time it's real. And so we are building a mobile app, basically, that runs on your phone, as you saw in the promotional video. You put it left and right on the table, and it uses to track the score, just what you would like to do with this orange and red, no, red and blue, green, whatever, plastic stuff, and then we send those results to a backend service, and then we can build ranking, matching, ELO, whatever. The reason why we choose this app approach instead of really sophisticated high-tech stuff with a somehow smart table that automatically gets it is the idea that if you are just an individual and you meet with a friend in a pub and you play table soccer, you just take out your phone, you don't need any other infrastructure. If you're like a corporation like us who just likes to support table soccer, then you set up this for your company, and also if you are the owner of a pub or venue and you have some tables, you can just set this up in the ranked system. And professionals, I think it was a bit short, but there was a very nice girl explaining all our colleagues how table soccer is really played. That was Mai Ling. She is, I think, German champion and European team champion.
European team champion, yes.
We are also not only sponsoring this conference, we are also sponsoring this women's table soccer team. You don't have any chance. So if you think you know anything about table soccer, no, you don't. And they are also interested for training, for simulations, for preparing of tournaments and matches in the software. So we have some professional consultancy in what we're doing. And most importantly, of course, for us, it's having fun building stuff together and trying out new technologies, new concepts that are probably best applied to a serious, non-trivial, but not real-life customer project before we go out in the open and claim that we are experts in building, I don't know, event-sourced, reactive streaming stuff. Okay, I just checked with a line counter. It's the whole setup, front and back end, roughly 80,000 lines of code. The first commit back in 2019. Yeah, we tend to do iterations, so there's maybe, except the package structure and the existence of a POM XML file, nothing present from this first commit anymore. And we have actually currently 5 active developers, but it's a bit come and go because, as you can see, we do it in 20% slack time. We have a concept at Holisticon that from Monday to Thursday, you belong to the customer, and Friday, you belong to us, so to ourselves, so we can build stuff like this. But with the setup of people coming and going, 4 years actually means 1 year of, or a fifth of 8.8 of a year setup time, if you do the math. Okay, our problem space we want to address, we play table soccer. First impression when you think about table soccer, it's really simple domain, right? I mean, you're at the table and you score a goal, and if you score 1 goal more than your opponent team, you win. So where's the challenge? Actually, there is, because you might know this when you play in a pub or in your company, everyone uses different rule setups. So best of 3, best of 5, 6 goals, 10 goals, switching sides, the winner stays on the table and the challenging team pays for the next round. Everything is possible. This is somehow unwritten rules. In case of Mai Ling with the professional stuff, written rules for professional table soccer. And you all have to take this into account and implement this in your world. Also, we are dealing with real people who might download an app and just play in a pub. So all this data privacy, right to be forgotten, applies. And we really had to consider scalability because currently in the testing phase, it's 4 Holisticon people playing. But you can imagine that Friday night, Saturday night will, if this is a successful application, will be a large peak. And Monday morning will go down to almost nothing again, probably. except they're like us and play during work time. And so, yeah, after all, this simple mission turned out to be not to be a trivial implementation task. What we choose to do, I'm very proud about my artist capabilities. So just a rough overview, we have a front-end part, a back-end part, obviously. The front-end part I don't know anything about. I try to avoid front-end wherever I can. But I was told that it's built for web usage and app usage using Angular and Capacitor. And the backend I know a bit about, we choose Kotlin. I think Josh can't hear us right now, but everything he told you about Java 21, Kotlin developers said, yeah, sure, finally. We are all into Spring Boot. We tried actually to run Axon without Spring Boot to learn the configuration, but one day Simon said, please, Jan, stop. Yeah? We just auto-configure stuff. It works, it helps to understand what happens in the magic in the background, but it's not fun. And yeah, because of this come and go, incremental, agile way we are doing it, we choose this incremental approach of first building the game set and then afterwards. And yeah, the technologies we choose, especially Axon Framework, of course, and Axon Server, really help with this approach. And yeah, go on, please. A bit about architecture. This is just, the slides are there. There was a lot of talking also yesterday about clean architecture, just a raise of hand, who knows it? So who applies it? Who think he really applies it? Cool, okay. I won't go deep in, but we had another talk that was not accepted for today where we put the Axon artifacts in the clean architecture world. So I have to just mention this now to annoy Alard a bit. The basic rule is that you have the somehow outside world, this is the infrastructure, so this might be your REST controllers, your requests coming in, or your data storage, messaging, whatever component, and inside your application, you have a domain model and domain core. This is where you implement everything is really happening. So what happens? What is a match? What is a goal? What happens if I win a set? What happens? This is all completely technology agnostic, modeled inside the core, and then via this port, which is an interface, an adapter implementation inside the inner layer transported to the outer ring. So the arrows are missing here, but basically the flow of dependency goes from outside to inside. Domain doesn't know application, and application doesn't know infrastructure. Go on, please. For the purpose of today and what we'll tell you, if this is clean, onion, hex, port adapter, we don't really care. There's this great book, Getting Your Hands Dirty with Clean Architecture by Tom Hamburg. Really, it's a great read. And I think it's in this first chapter or even the preface that don't care too much about these separations, just stick to the concepts. And yeah, the only important thing I think on this slide is, as I already said, if messaging and storage are part of your infrastructure and not part of your domain, the typical Axon aggregate must not live in your domain core because it's responsible for messaging and storage. So we use it as a kind of a proxy in the infrastructure ring and let it use the stateful domain model. Yeah. I learned this morning that this picture I always use is 13 years old, but it was in blue when we saw this earlier. Again, nothing you don't know, not that important, but I want to point out the benefits we found because in our case, we don't have just a CRUD operation now where we somehow artificially separate command and query or basically do create customer, customer, created, query, customer. Our right side is very one-dimensional. It's score goal, score goal, score goal, score goal. And the query side is who is the best player, who scored the most goals in August, who is the highest ELO ranking. So it's completely asymmetric. So we really have a use case for building specific query projections for what we're doing. And Also really helpful because of this 20% rule. We can just start writing the gameplay, don't care about ELO ranking, and just later invent ELO ranking based on the events we already have. So this is something where CQRS ES really helps us. It's not just maybe some time if we have 2 nodes writing and 4 nodes reading, this might help. This is helpful from the beginning on. Okay, this was what we want to build, how we generally approached it. I mentioned that the domain is not that easy as it seems. And if anything is not as easy as it seems, Simon is a good guy to talk about it.
Yeah, let's jump in. So, as Jan said, we started with some domain-driven design stuff. So we had a session with 1,000 stickies on the wall. That was very important to understand all this. So especially not about the gameplay, but about all this surrounding, who want to play this, what is the value, and so on. So we did the domain exploration. And then we came up with some strategic design, actually saying, OK, let's separate this area. So what we are going to build, so identify some bounded context, maybe relate them to each other. So we came up with this simple context map. Basically, you see currently we intend to have 4 bounded contexts. We have the account management, and these white boxes represent the main concepts that are related there, so not immediately aggregates, but at least what is it about. So account management, yeah, a user should be somehow visible to the system, so we have an account. Then there is, of course, statistics. So the reason why you should install this app is actually because you're interested. Who is the best player in the company for this week, for example, right? So that's the main value, actually. And to get this value, you of course, you need to implement the gameplay. So we have to track the results correctly. We have to track the rules which are applicable to those results. And in order to create some sort of sensible statistics, you have to actually look on the rules and say, OK, can I compare these 2 matches? Do they fall in the same category, or is it just 2 completely different rule sets, so I can't put them into the same bucket in the statistics? And tournament will follow. We didn't start it yet, but especially if you think of leagues or competitions or small cups where you think, like, I want to have 25 teams playing each other, so you want to schedule a game plan, whatever, this will actually follow. Let me go them one by one a little bit and give you some insights what we observed there. So initially, account and account management was really not on the plan because we were a little bit over-scarried by all these kind of apps you have to install on your computer and then provide personal data for scoring table soccer. So we were really long thinking of that we can get rid of this registration. But then at some point, there were two important aspects. So one of the things we said, we want to have personal statistics, which are not, done for Mickey Mouse, but done for you. So not a virtual name, but a real account. And you can do a lot more if you have a real account bounded to an email address. And the second one was, since it's an app and it has a REST endpoint, there might be people that are able to hook in and produce frauds, just claiming that they won 2,500 games or whatever. So we were thinking about fraud detection and prevention. And one of the easiest things you can do if you have personal accounts is you can actually notify people that were claiming to play in this game. And they should just acknowledge that the game really took place. So it was a very easy back channel, actually. So we agreed on building an account. And building an account means you have an account in your system, and usually you have some sort of authentication outside, which is a usual thing. And usually you don't build authentication, or hopefully not building authentication yourself, but just take an existing solution. So we opted in for the Google Firebase, and they provide a wonderful authentication service with social login and everything else. And so we use that. That's very easy, integratable. But very interesting to say, OK, I have an external system which is not event-sourced, which has its own state and is stateful on its own. And we have an event-sourced application, and we need to be in sync with them somehow. So that was an interesting learning just to observe how it works. And then we had actually two issues. So we had the social login, which is, of course, clear if you play somewhere just with your Twitter account or X account now. Then you get like a verified account from the SSO. But you might want to register with your email address. So we had this issue of, okay, how we verify this email address is really your email address and not someone of someone else. Then we wanted to have one email address for account only used once, so uniqueness constraint on a business property, which is not automatically a technical property. So how to do this in an event source system. And yeah, so the one is, as the text says, run with sagas, and we will get into that in a moment. And the other one is set-based validation, important concepts that you can see in many other situations. Statistics. Statistics is actually a kind of set of projections, right? You're not modifying it actively by sending commands to this context. So there are no commands at all. But what you have is, of course, you need to get somehow your data. And so we decided to say, for statistics, we will create specific milestone events that we will basically send between contexts. And these milestone events will contain the entire data that we require for the statistics, and then the statistics will actually deduce all kind of metrics and rankings out of that. So we have two main concepts there in the statistics context. So the first one is metric. So this is actually how many scores I scored, that's how many goals, right? Or how many games or matches I played. And the other one is ranking, which is putting this value in some context and saying, and how good is it in comparison to someone else, right? For my company, or for this room, or for this whatever. We also identified that there will be exhaustive amount of possible metrics and rankings, right? Because, I mean, you implement this one, and the next guy says, hey, could you implement that one? This is also very important for us. So we had to deal with the fact that there will be kind of incremental increase, and we didn't want to say, you know, you do have this fixed set of what you can choose from, but we wanted to have kind of automatic auto-discovery of if we build a new one, we just deploy it, and then it's available, right? And so both front-end and back-end actually rely on this concept, so there is no fixed list of what is implemented now, but we have kind of an auto-discovery for that stuff. And we are using scatter-gather queries for that. Who knows what that is? Scatter-gather? Okay, who's using it? Wow, 3 hands. Okay, interesting. 5. Okay, we're not counting. And another thing about statistics is it's mostly time-based, right? I want to know something like, give me the amount of goals I scored last week, last month, last year, since beginning of time, since my account exists, right? But it's always a kind of a time plays a role there, right? So the selection of a projection is important, and I think this is one of the important concepts of CQRS, to really optimize and look what is actually your functional requirement. And the functional requirement here is everything I want is kind of a time slice. So we opted in to use InfluxDB, which is a time series database actually for storing values, as a primary projection storage, which was also very interesting to integrate. Okay, gameplay. Yeah, as Jan said, gameplay should be easy, right? But it's actually not easy. So what you have is you have a state machine where you kind of, match setup in before, then you have your teams, and then the only command you're sending is score goal, score goal, score goal, score goal. And then the game should decide that you are actually currently in the 3rd match set of 5, and we're doing, best of 5 or best of 3 or 5 from 5, and your players are allocated that way, and the rules are configured in a way that there is no draw, and you are playing until 10 goals, and you have to switch sides after actually every match set, and so on. And this is highly configurable. So you're building a state machine that understands the game semantics, but then you say, okay, actually nothing is constant here. So there is no rule implied in this game machine, but it's passed from outside to inside. And in our as Jan said, it's a third implementation. In our second implementation, we thought the world is easier and put it to the YAML file. That's not very good because actually you can't ever change it, right? You are event sourced. Once you play the game with a certain configuration, you can't change this configuration, so you have to think that the configuration is also has to be event sourced. And then your projections make sense and your gameplay makes sense and you can replay all this stuff and it's valid actually. And another choice we had in this context was we said, actually we have this concept of virtual room, which is a location where the table is there, where the participants are in and the rules are defined. And there you can play, on this table, you can play your matches. And they said, it's a little bit too fat for one aggregate. Because then you have imagine you have a room with 20 tables. So you don't want to lock everything if someone scores a goal on one table, in one match. So we said, let's split it up. So we had 2 aggregates, actually. There is a room with all this set up. And then every time you create a new match, you have a new match aggregate, and the whole gameplay is happening there. And of course, as soon as you have 2 consistency boundary inside of a bounded context, what you need to do, you need to synchronize them. Because if I pause the game and go to get a pizza, someone else could actually play in the time, right? So I need to free the table. And if I return back and it's free, I can continue my match. So I have some kind of sagas to synchronize this. And yeah, that was pretty interesting. And we thought, I was building this piece of code, and I was like, okay, let's start with a saga. And I started to understand, okay, and this situation, and identified that we don't really have a language how to describe it, really. Not a visual language, how we draw what is happening. I mean, you can draw a BPMN diagram, but it's not very helpful because you need this notion of command and event and all this stuff and how the saga reacting on certain points. And to give it just an impression, so we came up with we're using Miro board or concept board for representing this. You should be able to read this, but this is one, so these purple guys, these are the sagas. And so this is how you end up in something simple like, I would free a table. And for me, it was, kind of learning that we need to visualize stuff that we don't understand because you need to speak about this, you need to communicate this. It's not just writing 25 event handler annotations on some methods, but you need a language for this. And I think we currently don't really have a very good language for doing this. So this is just an attempt. Yeah, but sagas, do you want to tell me more about sagas?
Keep in mind the term sagas a moment. I already said it in an introduction, we like to think in patterns, and I think I said the same sentence last year. Patterns are not invented, they are observed. So everything we're talking about now, good practice, best practices, patterns, we don't claim that we came up with it, we just found reoccurring stuff that we can use, and we invite you to challenge us. If there's a better way of doing it, if you can think of anything we missed, just go ahead. But now back to Saga. We all know, and Simon just said it. It's typically you have 2 aggregates which have to get synchronized persistent state, and I'm using Saga in between. We had an interesting challenge that was the email verification, but it also applies for stuff like payment. Yesterday in the unconference we had a session about third-party integration patterns. So I have my aggregate, and I have some state in the outside world, which is not an aggregate in my world, and I have to combine these to be in sync. And what we're using in the pattern we call this Saga with backing aggregate for this outside state, something. I mean, consider you're getting an email with some encrypted key token inside, and then you click the link, we know that it's you. This is completely different medium. This is not even in your browser or in your app. This is just happening somewhere else. So what we're doing is we have the account we want to have verified, And then we build an email verification aggregate that knows the secret we used, the email we used, and the controller that is called when you click on the link fires back to this aggregate. It might already be confirmed because you click it twice, or it might be already timed out because we said after 2 days we don't care anymore. So we have state that we manage in an aggregate dedicated for this purpose only, and then the Saga gets the event and notifies our real business aggregate that everything is fine and we can move on. So this is really helpful, and maybe keep in mind that also we're trying to kill the aggregate, as we will learn today, sometimes introducing an additional aggregate just to manage the outside world is helpful. While talking about email, the email is not the identifier of the account aggregate. The email is just a property, but the email has to be unique. And whenever you have this mismatch between the technical aggregate ID used inside the system for message routing and some business identifier that has to be unique, the concept is called set-based validation. So you know only your aggregate, but to validate an incoming command, you have to know all your siblings. And yeah, what we did to do this, and which is a quite common pattern, we intercept the command coming in with a message interceptor. We have, think of it as an index table, so we store all existing email addresses in a persistent layer, not on the query side, but on the command side, and we use this to check, does this already exist or not? And of course, if we then route to the command to the aggregate, the event domain event that is published afterwards must update this persistence as well. This is working. It's a cool pattern. It's documented. I don't know, Yvonne, I don't see you, but she had a series of blogs about set-based validation. Not quite. But then in the current project, we had problems because now you rely in the unit of work part of your aggregate command handling, you rely on some external persistence to be in a certain state. And there might be really clever ways to solve this by locking and replicating database stuff. But there's a much easier way, and this is now for kudos Yvonne. It was her final blog article last October or November, so 1 year ago. Again, using an aggregate. The whole purpose of this aggregate is the set-based validation of an existing email. So for this aggregate, the email is the target identifier. So Axon knows for sure if it already saw this aggregate or not. And it basically just internally, when the command handler says, okay, I can on creative missing work with this email, it basically just creates the account aggregate on the lowest level by calling aggregate lifecycle create new instance or stuff. So there's no Saga, no new command messaging, just an internal call, okay, I verified this. This is really useful. Of course, you can also unclaim an email and say this is free now. So yeah, we found this pattern due to the great Axon support in our project. And we found out that we have this set-based validation slide, and this is somehow a mismatch because we have this large sequence diagram, and actually the solution is very small. But then we got help from Sarah yesterday, and she said that this approach is better, but only if you have one attribute you care about, because the target identifier of this helper aggregate just can have one key. If you want to say my full name, last name, and my email has to be unique, you still have to come up with some indexing table persistent state. So it was our way of saying, sorry, we were wrong, but yesterday we found out there are two options to the same problem, and you choose which one to take. Yeah, another thing Simon already mentioned, we really distinct, and I think this is really important, there are domain events. These are the events that the aggregate publishes and that the event sourcing handler and your internal event handler consumes. But anything that leaves your context is a different event at least, so because the outside world should not rely on your inner event logic understanding. What does account created or customer moved mean? I'm just interested in your current address. So there often is a question when I introduce Axon Framework to new colleagues, can a command handler send multiple events? The answer is of course, but only your domain events. The aggregate must not be responsible for aggregating data for milestone events that you just publish for other contexts. So what we're doing is, if it's a short-running thing like match, we know it has a beginning and an end. We start a Saga, and the Saga reacts to the domain events, collects data as is displayed in this sequence, and when we get this match finished, match accepted, we take all the data we collected and publish it. This is a great pattern because you know that you clean up after yourself. For account or room, this doesn't apply because typically you create it and it might be there forever. So then regular, just a projection like you would build a view as well is a good solution here. Yeah, we already had the question who uses getter queries. What that does is that every query handler that subscribed or it's set I think this only works with Axon Server now, right? Is there a way of having getter?
Distributed? No.
So you start up, in our case now, room and match and account, and they tell the Axon server that they might be the right service to call for a question for, I don't know, some metric you are choosing, and then without knowing who is actually registered and who might answer what, I can just publish my query to the Axon server. Axon server will then distribute them to all registered handlers in parallel, and give me the joint list. And I can say whoever answers within a second is fine. Everyone is too slow, which is also a great pattern if you want to use a cache only if the remote system is too slow or thing. This is really, really useful, and we use this because, as I told you in the beginning, we don't know all the possible metrics, rankings, projections we do, so we can just somewhere deploy new handlers and say, give me the stuff you know. It also goes a bit in the GraphQL direction, the latest stuff you showed me, so they can tell us what kind of rankings and metrics they support, and then we can choose which information we want to dig in. Okay, this is the moment I learned from Alard where we say we have to be truly reactive. This is what we choose because everything we talked about now is how the aspects we all know, how internally our Axon aggregate event handlers are event-driven. But now we have a front end or an app, and you do not want to score a goal, count to 10, and then click a reload button and see if you're now leading 5-4. You want to score a goal, continue playing, and just rely on the system refreshing. And also statistics are just published somewhere and recalculated for most goals in September. So this is why we really built this in a completely reactive way. So no send and wait. Alard says, I don't know, an angel dies or so, every time he sees it in my code. And we are all in for Spring Webflux. And because I didn't know that much about Spring Webflux, but Simon does, I had a special request, so now the next section is for me.
Yeah, so let's speak less about patterns, but maybe some solutions that we came up with. So so the main idea is why to use a Webflux is because you don't have this blocking one thread per connection or per connected client, right? So we have a clear non-functional requirement to say if we scale out for real on Friday evening, everyone is playing table soccer. I don't want to install a lot of machines just to handle threats for the possible connections, right? So I want to do it in a non-blocking way. So Webflux comes with a netty and then integrates well actually to all the reactor stuff. Internally, we, by the way, use the Axon Reactor library, which is also supported by AxonIQ. So it's a bridge between these completable future stuff and actually project reactor abstractions like Flux and Mono and so on. So we wanted to avoid actually these blocking threads, but we wanted to push the information about, for example, the match results directly to the client. So we stick to server-sent event protocol, which is a text-based protocol that you also can transmit over HTTP. And so here, don't be afraid, that's Kotlin on the right side. So we have actually a domain service that is handling all the query part. So we ask the query, give me the match information for this particular room and this particular match ID. So what we get back is a subscription query result. Who's using subscription queries? Who knows what it is? Oh, some few guys. Yeah. So the idea is that a usual query or a plain query is you get one question and get one answer. And here you get one answer plus an open stream of updates of possible future answers to the same query. And on the projection side, you can actually decide to push into this open channel and then deliver this information to your consumer. So as you see, the subscription query in line 5, right, we get the subscription result, and it contains of 2 parts. You have the initial result, which is what has been there so far, and the second one is actually a flux of updates. So that's our business API, and on the handler, so we're using routing functions of Webflux, and there you have this functional handler that you can just register to answer specific URL requests. And then, so basically it's very easy, call the domain service, get the flux, and then we came up with a small extension. So what we want to do is we want to convert this flux of information to the event stream. So we actually take the data objects, convert them to data transfer objects, and then we merge that flux with something which is called heartbeat. And if you carefully read the specification, this server-sent event stream may be closed because of inactivity. So you have to deal somehow to keep it alive. So what you usually implement is something very nice like this. So you just say, I want a timely interval to have a ping there, and then just you're sending ping messages in between of inactivity. So if you score for not too long time. The next subject is, and we are a little bit famous for this, we're doing testing. I'm sorry for that, guys. We did a workshop actually last time we were here on testing of event source systems. And who recognizes pyramid in it? Okay, thank you.
It's a testing pyramid.
It's a test picture if you are still awakened. Okay, so let's speak about testing a little bit. So what we produce actually our own testing library, which is kind of add-on to the Axon test library that exists there and does a lot of things right. So we love this BDD style of testing. So usually you do it if you do fixture testing in Axon, it's very similar to that one. But you have this given, when, then behavior. And if we're testing behavior and not just asserting some results, that's the way to go. Because you want this multi-step setup moving you to some state before you actually assert. So you can't set up the entire system in one shot, right? So this has some additions to what Axon Test is providing, but the largest addition actually, so this is based on a library called JGiven, which exists for the Java world. It has nothing to do with Axon at all, but we built this bridge, actually, Axon Testing JGiven. The nice thing about this is that the results of this test will look like this. So it will generate you a report, which, who knows what is Gherkin? Yay, many Gherkin fans here. Yeah, so the idea of JGiven was, it's boring to write Gherkin, but it's nice to read Gherkin. So you're writing Java, or Kotlin. Kotlin. You could have written Java, but you will write Kotlin, and then you get a Gherkin report. And just to show you that, sometimes things break, you see actually you can include any kind of information in your test failures and so on. Then the next one, I have to hurry up because otherwise we will get no food. We were building some events wrongly, and then we had to build some upcasters and test upcasters. So we came up with some idea how you can do it more efficiently. If you want to test an upcaster, you usually start from your event, like physical representation on disk or on a wire. You construct an intermediate stream of intermediate representation, you pass it to upcaster, you deserialize it back, and then the asserts. And it's a lot of plumbing code doing every time. So I came up with a different solution. So you see it on the right side. We are writing upcaster test. The only thing we have to specify it, and you can't detect it smart and otherwise, is what kind of encoding you're using. So what is your actually, what is the form of serialization? Based on that, we can try to get the correct serializer in place because we'll need it for the testing. And as you see, it's a parameterized JUnit 5 test actually under the hood. It will get a list of events to upcast and a list of events of the result. So you actually create a stream, hunt it through the upcaster, and then you can assert some stuff. And you want to ask me where these events are coming from. And you're right. So, and I love convention over configuration too. You can configure it, but for a given package structure and name of the test method, I will expect you to put some resources in your test folder. So just putting files there. And yeah, so there is some logic how you name this. So this is the full qualified event class name. The first numbers is following this scheme like in Flyway, so you can number stuff. And the last one is a revision. So you can basically just put stuff on your file system. You just copy from the Axon server and say, okay, this is the initial one, and this is what I want to get. And then you're done, right? So no plumbing code. And then, as I told you, you have to assert. Asserting on intermediate representation is a little bit hard because you have a serialized object containing serialized data, containing this stuff inside, and you need to, do all this. So we said, I know there is Hamcrest and Axon Test, and Steven especially loves that. Me not, I'm sorry. So we are more the assert.j guys. So we started this Axon testing assert, and currently we have the stuff for intermediate representation, so you can assert anything there, like what is the target revision of the event or whatever. But there will be future, so we will actually come up with senseful asserts for Axon artifacts. Okay, and I'm sorry that I don't have time, but this is very important. So one of the key players in this architecture is actually the Axon server. And we went all in. So we only have actually Axon server. We have, for the sagas, we have another persistence, and the influx is there. But this allows us actually to build the application and do this scale out later at some point without doing anything, right? So we will just spawn instances, maybe for command model, maybe we will move projections for the influx at some point of time. So we will, of course, we're measuring performance of all of this, but it's so easy to do. And this gives us incredible high throughput in the end, so we don't have to scale up Axon server ever, I think, for the application. Or if we do, then there will be maybe another talk.
But then we are successful enough that we can afford it.
Yeah. And currently we're running it in a Docker setup, but we could also go for the AxonIQ cloud for that. So that's it. Yeah. So summarizing this stuff you've seen, pay attention on the architecture. I think this clean hexagonal stuff is definitely worth to look at because you have much more navigatable application. You understand what it is doing. It's less grouped around your technical artifacts, much more about your business value and what you're doing actually. This bounded context separation helps a lot to think in boxes and say, okay, reduce complexity. I have the bounded context. I have the core domain implementation here inside, and I can focus on this really. And if I need to translate it to another one, yeah, then use an SEL and just, convert it to another language. I encourage you to use Kotlin, especially for CQRS ES and Axon, because using Kotlin type system, especially inline classes and data classes, you can really model your language. So there are no strings in our application, no ints. Okay, so it's full. There is a score, and there is a go, and there is a player name, and so on. So there are no strings. Okay, so and we know Project Valhalla will eventually be there in Java, maybe in 10 years, and then we will get the same. But yeah, it's a rumor that they will implement it eventually because they're doing it since 10 years, I think. But currently, you can do it today with Kotlin actually. So do that. That helps a lot to write cleaner code.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for your time. Thanks for being patient. I know you're hungry.
So there actually is one question on the app, and I know one of my colleagues already answered it, but I also wanted to be on the recording, so I think that's fair to still do that. Sorry for holding you back for the lunch. Yesterday went very smooth, so I'm sure you'll still be able to get some. Or if you're really hungry.
There's a long line now anyway, so if you stay for 5 minutes, you will be much quicker.
Exactly. So the question is from Rafa. I didn't totally get why you have heartbeats in the controller. Do you mind repeating that part, please? So for the subscription queries.
If it has to be repetition, you have to do it.
Yeah, so the service send events is a protocol where you, so based on your infrastructure, I mean, it's an open channel. It's either HTTP2, it's a stable connection, which can, of course, be broken down, and then you have to reconnect. For HTTP1, I think it's even long polling, so they open a connection and hold as long as possible. And between your Spring Boot and your browser, there might be some infrastructure. And this infrastructure might say, yeah, this connection, nothing is going on for 25 seconds, so I just close it. So maybe someone just forgot to close that. So it's okay for the infrastructure to close a stale connection. And in order to prevent this, a good thing is that you can actually say, okay, I need this heartbeat. It's just a ping. It's just no payload data needs to be handled there. You're just sending a ping just to keep this connection running in sense that some infrastructure might not close it just because it's thinking it's a stale connection, right? So this is why you need the heartbeat, and then you just push it over. So because sometimes people need too long to score a goal, and then...
Cool thing is that Simon didn't want us to have in the slides because he said it's too technical, it's not related to what we're building. I found it interesting, and the only question we get, bam.
Good, right? Does that answer the question, Rafa? Yeah, I figured. Actually, another one came in. So, and as everybody's still sitting, I hope things are okay. So, do you use Kotlin value classes? Do they play well with the event serialization format? Coming in from Nick.
Very good question and very nice observation.
Yes and no.
Yes, we're using value classes for everything. And no, they're not playing well with serialization, especially in Jackson. And the interesting part is, depending on how serious you take your domain core to be infrastructure free, it should be not at least, I think it's also in practice like that, yeah. In this project, we did it. You shouldn't put serialization information into domain core, right? It has nothing to do with the domain core, right? It's a side aspect of something like serializing stuff. And Jackson allows to do this, so you have to write some mixins for that. So basically, class is located completely on a different place that point to that type and saying, by the way, if you serialize this, deserialize this, yeah, take the correct type, right? So our hope is that the next time we're speaking about this, we will use Apache Avro for this, and then we don't have any problem with serialization anymore. So it's actually not a problem of serialization, it's a problem of Jackson, that it's not yet supporting the value classes natively. But I have another good news for you. There is a Japanese library of Jackson Kotlin, which is it looks the same. You can just interchange the jar on your class path, and then you have the support for this. It's a little bit spooky because you're not using the official Jackson Kotlin module, but you're using some other, but it works. So there is a Jackson Kotlin, and I don't remember the name. I have it in my code base, so you can ask me later. I will post.
Funny thing is that we just encourage people to use a custom Axon testing library instead of the original one, but you don't do it with a Jackson library.
That's kind. Thanks for that. I think everybody's aching to get some food in their bellies. You still have 35 to 40 minutes left, so this should be sufficient to get some food, and then the midday keynote starts. So yeah, I'd like to give one last round of applause for Simon and Jan. Thanks for sharing your story. And enjoy the lunch.